For the first 3+ weeks of training camp, there really hasn't been a competition at right guard, but could that be changing now in the middle of joint practices? Connor Benintendi and I are going to be breaking it all down here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined here on our Thursday episode by my co-host, Connor Benintendi, and a special thanks to all the 12s out there, whether you're listening from Bellingham, Washington, or Providence, Rhode Island. We greatly appreciate each and every one of you for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. The Seahawks wrapping up the second of two joint practices today with the Titans in Nashville. Sounds like things got a little bit more testy today in Nashville, to go with the heat and the humidity. We'll be diving into some takeaways, some notes coming out of Nashville, and we'll be catching up with Carlton Johnson, the undrafted rookie corner out of Fresno State, who's been making some waves here the last couple of weeks as he tries to push to make Seattle's roster, or at minimum, be a practice squad player. This episode is brought your way by FanDuel. Make every moment more as the playoffs wind down. The sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster rate bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now for your lead story here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Up to this point in the first 3+ weeks of training camp, there really hasn't been a competition at right guard as everybody thought there was going to be for the Seahawks. Rookie Christian Haynes, he has been exclusively with the second team offense. Anthony Bradford, he's gotten all the first team reps. The only first team reps that Haynes has gotten to this point have been at left guard, when they have had Laken Tomlinson with a couple of veteran rest days. But not so fast, my friend, as Lee Corso likes to say. We may have a competition still brewing here before the start of the regular season, because Christian Haynes has started to make a little bit of a surge here the last week or so. And today in Nashville, as reported by our good friend Greg Bell from the Tacoma News-Tribune, Christian Haynes started in 11-on-11 over Anthony Bradford, and in one-on-one pass rush, 2 times he pushed the rusher to the ground. Quentin Bohanna of the Titans, he pushed in the back when he's already down. They were going nose to nose and jawing at each other. Connor, this should not surprise anybody, because if there's one thing we've already learned about Christian Haynes, I mean, he got booted from a training camp practice last week for getting into it with Derek Hall. Like, this guy is ornery. He likes to get after it after the whistle. There's a physicality to his game. This offensive line has badly needed somebody like that. And so now it feels like maybe, just maybe, it's better to start this late than never. We might truly have a competition now at the right guard spot. And Anthony Bradford's going to have to fend Christian Haynes off before September 8th.
Yeah, and I know that the word dog is so overused in football nowadays, but you do wonder if that is just what Christian Haynes is showing this coaching staff that they like in him. And he showed that in the preseason game against the Chargers. He had a good outing in that game. The big question with Christian Haynes is coming into the league was just whether he was going to be ready to compete against NFL competition coming out of UConn, just because of obviously not as big of schools, not as much NFL competition, things like that. But now he's had almost a full training camp to get in, compete against NFL players. We're coming to the end of this preseason, nearly, obviously, because we've got one more game and the couple practices we have here. But Christian Haynes is just, it was expected that eventually he was going to get to a point where maybe he could push Anthony Bradford for the spot. We just didn't know if it was going to be this year. And obviously he's showing that he might be ready a little bit sooner than we thought.
Yeah, I've been really encouraged by what I've seen. Obviously not in Nashville to see what happened today, but last week getting to see Christian Haynes get after it. You mentioned the Chargers game. What I really loved about the Chargers game was the movement skills that we saw from Christian Haynes. I mean, this is not just a 315, 320-pound mauler. Now, he's very capable of doing that, but you also see the athleticism. He tested pretty well at the combine at the guard position. So it's not like this is news necessarily, but his ability to move laterally, be able to get to reach blocks, be able to get to the second level, coupled with the fact that he'll just knock your block off when he's working in his minus. Those are things early on we didn't get a chance to see. The pads come out, and then we start to see Christian Haynes and Byron Murphy II has been the same way. Both of Seattle's first 2 draft picks, they were kind of just lying back in the weeds a little bit when there was no pads because their games are so predicated on physicality. And then you bring the pads out, and sure enough, both of them are starting to really show up now, and Christian Haynes is surging. I don't think Anthony Bradford's done anything to hurt himself in this competition, but I'm going to use that word now because giving him first-team reps today when Bradford was healthy, he was playing with a second team. It's clear that Scott Huff, the new line coach, and the rest of the coaching staff, they've seen enough here the last week. Hey, we're going to start taking the training wheels off a little bit. Let's see if Christian Haynes can go after this job. So now we've got 2 preseason games, a couple weeks of practice left before the regular season. And I very much think that Christian Haynes has done enough the last week that he's making things interesting. And I'll even go this far too. Some of the reports that are coming out today, I mean, Laken Tomlinson is a solid veteran, but I'm wondering if the Seahawks might consider, you know what? We signed you to a 1-year deal. Let's see what a youth movement looks like. Anthony Bradford at right guard, Christian Haynes at left guard. I don't think that happens for week 1, but I would not be stunned if we get at some point in the season. And that ends up being what happens at the guard spots because at the end of the day, the upside that those two bring and the fact that they're going to be under contract for at least 3 years together, that would be a big boon for this offensive line.
Yeah, and I did go look at it before we got on, Corbin, and he did play. I didn't see it. I must have missed it during the preseason game, and hopefully PFF is right. But they did say that Christian Haynes played 3 snaps at left guard. So that could have just been as a result of, somebody coming out, whatever. Who knows why? Or they may be experimenting with Christian Haynes at left guard. Obviously, we know he can play both spots. So I'm very curious to see how this shakes out. Obviously, Anthony Bradford started 10 games for Seattle last year, but that was not necessarily a plus position for Seattle last year, as we know. So I wouldn't necessarily – Anthony Bradford starting at guard was kind of we don't necessarily have a better option to step in right now. It'll work for this season, hopefully at the most, and then hopefully Haynes will be ready going into 2025, right? But if that could be – sooner and we could see a little bit more out of Christian Haynes in this preseason game coming up, I'm also curious to see what they do there because obviously they've talked about most starters, particularly first teamers, getting all the reps in practice and then sitting for this preseason game. But with this competition sort of heating up, Corbin, I am curious to see if they maybe try to play those guys somewhat 50-50 during the first half, whatever it might be. I don't know what Mike McDonald's plan is there. Both of them could sit just to see the depth guys go in, whatever it might be. But I am curious to see how that's going to shake out in this second game too.
I'd be surprised if those two guys are not playing in this game because that does feel like a position now that is very much up for grabs. When this time a week ago, I would have told you, Anthony Bradford had gotten every single rep with the ones. So it didn't feel like. It felt like Geno Smith against Drew Lock a few years ago. It just didn't feel like there was actually a competition brewing. But now that narrative is starting to change. As far as other competitions, real quick, we've talked about the right guard spot. We have talked ad nauseum about the third down running back position. George Holani seems like he is continuing to gain momentum on that front, getting first-team reps in Tennessee before Kenny McIntosh did. The slot cornerback spot, this is mainly when Witherspoon's playing on the outside. To me, Artie Burns has got that in lockdown. I just have not seen enough from DJ James to this point to suggest that competition's there. And we're going to dive into this here in a moment. Tight end was a position we were going to talk about anyway, but Pharaoh Brown could potentially have a serious injury, and that would change things quite a bit at the tight end spot. So there are still some other positions here that are very much up for grabs, a lot of them being more role positions for the Seahawks. But now this right guard spot opening up, Connor, really creates some intrigue for these last few weeks before the regular season gets here. Yeah,
I'm curious about what's going to happen with this tight end position in particular, just because obviously Pharaoh Brown is a big piece, and it would be really unfortunate to see him go down. But overall, these competitions, things are opening up a little bit more. I like what you said about Holani, Corbin. I think you're going to be right about George Holani, and I'm going to be wrong, and that's okay. You've been doing this a whole heck of a lot longer than I have been, so I'm okay with that. I think he's just the more complete back. It's going to be, and that's what you want in your third running back. We already know Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet are proven, pretty polished backs. You just want a guy who can come in. If both of those guys, let's say, were injured for one game or had small things that, you were down to two backs, let's say Ken Walker's out and all you have is Charbonnet in your third back, Helani's going to be a better fill-in than I think McIntosh will be. And he's showing that in practice, and that's why he's getting those reps with Charbonnet out as well. Artie Burns, I don't see much of a competition there at this point because DJ James just hasn't shown enough from what I've seen so far in camp, or so far from what I've heard in camp. Can't say I've been there, unfortunately. But Artie Burns has been a good player. He's proven. And I would rather keep him than, say, Mike Jackson at this point, just because we do have pretty solid depth on the outside as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that shakes out, though.
Yeah, still plenty of things that need to be sorted out before the final cutdown day, which is only 12 days away. It is coming quickly. So teams are already starting to figure out which guys we want to keep, which players we think are going to be toughest to get to the practice squad. So we'll have plenty more discussions on that front. When we come back, we're going to dive more into day 2 of joint practices against the Titans, including the aforementioned injury to Pharaoh Brown. That'll be coming up next year on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This episode is brought your way by FanDuel. We love sports. We love them so much. We never want them to stop. But since the playoffs have been done forever in the NBA and NHL, Olympics are now finished, we have fewer games. The sports aren't sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets us keep the sports going whenever we want. All we have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime we're in the mood. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 win or lose. Do you think Will Levis is going to throw for 200 yards against the Seahawks in Saturday's preseason game? Is Byron Murphy rising up in the defensive rookie of the year odds? Can Aaron Judge get to 60 home runs again for the Yankees? You can bet on all of these things on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com and add a big win to your summer bucket list today. FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Welcome back to Locked On Seahawks Thursday edition. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined on today's show by my co-host, Connor Benintendi, and a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks wrapping up, as we speak right now, their second joint practice should be concluding in Nashville. They'll have tomorrow mostly just a walkthrough. It's that travel day, just in Nashville. Saturday, they'll play their preseason game, which we expect to be mostly backups for that game after having these two challenging joint practices against the Titans. Connor, looking at what is out there, and again, this is something that's crazy for me. I'm normally on site. My car decided to break down on Sunday, and that prevented me from being able to get to my flight to go to Nashville. So I've had to kind of scour through what some of my buddies that are actually on site have been seeing and being in communication with people that have been on the ground just to have an idea what's going on. But one thing that we do know that happened today, and this just before we came on the air, Pharaoh Brown going down with what is suspected to be a knee injury. He was holding his knee after being hit by cornerback Roger McCrary, had to be carted off. This obviously is what you are hoping to avoid when you have these joint practices. You don't want any significant injuries. You've had some guys like Draymond Jones that have tweaked things, but nothing that's like season ending. Anytime you see a guy holding his knee and having to be carted off, though, your brain instantly shuffles to worst case scenario, torn ACL or a patellar tendon injury or any of those kind of things that would end the first season in Seattle for Pharaoh Brown before it even started. And there would obviously be a major ripple effect at that position group and for this offense if Pharaoh Brown is out for a significant amount of time.
Yeah, on the ground, holding the knee is just never a good sign. And I want to keep be as positive as I possibly can, because truly Pharaoh Brown was probably going to be a big part of this offense, especially just with his blocking acumen and his ability to get open, particularly in the middle of the field. So I do hate this for Brown more than anything else, especially coming to a new place, trying to get adjusted to being a Seattle Seahawk. Had a really good camp so far, obviously, because Noah Fant's been banged up. So, Brown's been in there and getting a lot of reps. And to see this happen, just focusing on the player for a moment, right, Corbin? You hate it for him. It really sucks. And I do hope that he's able to get healthy, and hopefully this isn't something that's going to end his season. Obviously, the big sort of question mark here is whether he gets placed on injured reserve before the final cutdown or after, right? Because then if it's before, he's out for the season. If they do hold a roster spot for him and then place him on IR, then he's able to potentially come back after 4 games. So there's going to be a lot to watch here in these next couple days, just in terms of how that injury is going, what's happening with it, what they view is going to be the timetable for return. But it shakes up a whole lot in this tight end room, because obviously we've been talking about it, whether Seattle's going to hold 4 tight ends just because of obviously AJ Barner being a 4th round pick. You're not going to let him go and potentially clear waivers and not be able to get him back. And then obviously Brady Russell has been emerging. So 4 tight ends was in the cards here. Now you have a tough decision with Pharaoh Brown going down, whether you're going to just keep 3 and put him on season-ending IR. Maybe that decision is easy based off the way that the injury diagnosis is looking. But there's just so much we don't know yet.
Yeah, that's the thing that I want to make sure our listeners understand. We don't know anything. Nothing's been revealed to this point other than he was holding his knee after being hit by McCrary and then had to be carted off. And there have been some stories coming out of other training camps with guys getting carted off, and it ended up that they dodged a bullet and didn't have a serious injury. So the Seahawks are going to be hoping that that is the case here. A lot of times, though, as you mentioned, when a guy's holding their knee on the ground like that, they have to be carted off. Most of the time, it's not a good scenario. So hopefully this is one of those rare instances where you get good news when you weren't suspecting it. But if he has an ACL tear or anything like that, I don't think it's a difficult decision. The Seahawks are going to put him on IR because he's not going to be back this year. If it's something like a meniscus where he could potentially be back at some point during the season, then that's where you have to make the decision. Are we going to keep him on the roster on cut down day and then put him on injured reserve? Seattle has done this plenty of times over the years, so it's not abnormal. This is just one of the mechanisms that teams have at their disposal. It just means you have one other player that could have been on the roster that you're going to have to dangle and hope that they get through waivers, and then you can bring him back after you get Pharaoh Brown put on injured reserve. But if he goes on IR, regardless of whether it's before or after, he's not going to be on the roster to open the season. If that is the case, that does mean AJ Barner is going to be on this football team. Not that he was not going to be anyway. Brady Russell, I viewed him as a lock last week. He's now very much a lock. You're going to need him to play a lot more snaps. Barner's going to fill more of that traditional wide tight end role. So until we know the actual details of the injury, how much time that Pharaoh Brown is going to miss from this, if any, then certainly until we have that information, we don't know all the details. But this could mean that you're going to have 3 tight ends and it opens up a spot elsewhere. Maybe it ends up making it somebody like Tyler Mabry, who's a good special teams player, or Jack Westover, the undrafted rookie out of Washington. Maybe they still keep 4 because all those guys can play some special teams. But this does have a domino effect on that tight end group and just the way that the offense is going to function. And it really puts the most pressure on AJ Barner. There's no question about it, because he's the most natural fit to fill Pharaoh Brown's role in this offense. Moving away from the injury, as far as what's been coming out of Nashville, we don't have footage of all the team scrimmages and one-on-ones. There's been plenty of them that have been kicking out, though. And there's been 2 prevailing themes these last 2 days that continue today. One, good luck defending DK Metcalf and Ryan Grubb's offense. This guy has been dominating. Knock on wood, albeit Tennessee's top 2 corners have been out during these joint practices. So that is something worth noting. But it hasn't really mattered who's been going up against DK. In training camp, he's going against the best corners in the business in Seattle, and he's had plenty of success. He's off to a fast start. And speaking of those corners, Riq Woolen, I think everybody in the Titans organization is going to be fired up to see number 27 get on an airplane and not have to deal with him the rest of this year. Most notably, Calvin Ridley, who is a pretty darn good receiver in his own right. And Riq Woolen has dominated him in these 2 days of joint practices.
Yeah, I love everything that's coming out. And by the way, if on at least on the defensive side of the ball, if you really want to see a funny quote, go check out Brady Henderson of ESPN's Twitter account for something that Jamal Adams chirped at the Seattle Seahawks sideline there about San Francisco. That's a good laugh. But overall, yeah, I mean, you see Reek Woolen, and we were talking about this before the show, Corbin, focusing on him just for a moment. He's been shutting down these Tennessee Titans receivers, and obviously fans are getting excited because we had what was perceived as a down year for Reek Woolen. I think there's a lot more going on behind the scenes there, and we've talked about that ad nauseum at this point. But honestly, at this point, I'm washing whatever Reek Woolen's season was last year away. I'm only focusing on now and what we've seen in camp and what we're seeing at this joint practice. And that's that Calvin Ridley and these receivers have no space to run, because anytime, even if they get a little bit of separation, Reek Woolen is right there because of that closeout speed. It is just incredible to watch. I think he's going to make a big jump this year. I don't want to dangle the All-Pro too much because
I'm going to.
You're gonna dangle it. You're gonna dangle.
If you want to be cautious, he looks every bit like an All-Pro to me.
I agree. And that's the thing. I was trying to be cautious, but I agree that he looks everything like an All-Pro. And especially, these are good receivers he's going up against. These receivers have been burning some of Seattle's other corners. You saw Carlton Johnson, and I think it was DJ James have a couple of rough one-on-ones yesterday. So it just shows the gap between some of these younger Seahawks corners and the more experienced Seahawks corners. And then also on the DK Metcalf side of things, Corbin, nobody's stopping him right now. Nobody's stopping him. And I don't want to overreact, but this is the iron sharpens iron aspect that Mike McDonald's talking about. You have this defense that is so talented for Seattle. They're going at it for, almost 3 weeks just in training camp on their own home field. Now they go play somebody else, and DK looks hungry, man. And this is going to be something that we're going to be watching all year long, obviously, is whether or not this could be his best season of his career so far with Ryan Grubb. And, I've wrote about it. I know you've wrote about it, Corbin, doing projections and different things about just how he fits into this offense and what role he's going to fill, obviously, of the sort of pseudo Romo Dunze role from his Washington offense. But he's burning guys, and I wish we could see, obviously, the team periods. I know that, obviously, Seattle has that on lock right now, which is completely understandable. I almost prefer that just so that fans can't see so much and other teams can't see so much. But, man, I'm excited about what I'm seeing right now.
Yeah, Metcalf had a huge pass play connection with Geno Smith on the first play from scrimmage today. So that's just kind of how it has been for opponents having to deal with DK Metcalf, and then Reek Woolen's looking good. And the other corner, Devin Witherspoon, you were talking to Jamal Adams trash talk. To me, the best thing that has come out today, several reporters were reporting about this on site, that Witherspoon intercepted a wheel route that was thrown by Will Levis towards the end of practice today. And he went sprinting to find Jamal Adams on Tennessee's sideline to make sure he could give him the football. And look, this is all former teammates having fun. There's nothing malicious with it, but it is really cool to see. Quandre Diggs has been chirping. Jamal Adams has been chirping. Geno Smith has been chirping with him. I mean, Russell Wilson was not a trash talker. Geno Smith can be. So, that had to be really entertaining to watch. And that's one of the values of joint practice. Again, it was just a little more testy out there, but sounds like they got through it without any major fights breaking out. And now they'll have their game Saturday, and then they will move on. Overall, a pretty successful joint practice period for the Seahawks. Coming up next, you mentioned the name Carlton Johnson. Has had a few rough reps in Tennessee, but he's looked pretty darn good in the practice field. It's been kind of an ascending undrafted player here in recent weeks. I had a chance to catch up with the former Fresno State star at the VMAC during training camp. Love that one-on-one coming up next here on our Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Locked On Seahawks is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? For me right now, I wish I just had a little more time to play college football 25. The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. BetterHelp Online Therapy will assess your needs and can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at BetterHelp.com/LockedOn. Welcome back to the Thursday edition of Locked On Seahawks. It's your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined on today's show by my co-host, Connor Benintendi. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. The Seahawks have had a history of finding undrafted gems, and that has not been omitted from the cornerback position and the safety spot. Seattle's found plenty of undrafted players in the secondary who have ended up having significant roles throughout the Pete Carroll era, and maybe, just maybe, that will continue into the Mike Macdonald era. One player in particular, Connor, we talked about this a little bit a few weeks ago. It seemed like this was a pretty quiet year for undrafted rookies. And yet here the last few weeks, we've obviously been raving about George Holani. The coaching staff seems to be loving him at that third down running back role. There's been a few other guys emerge, but Carlton Johnson has been a player who has very much put himself on the radar with his sub 4.3 speed, had 5 pass breakups in a single practice one practice last week. He has been consistently getting into it with receivers. You can just tell he's kind of got, I know you hate it being mentioned, but he's got that dog in him. That's what the players would say. And he has shown that. And you can't teach 4.28 speed. So for that reason, at times, I feel like Carlton Johnson has been the better player out of the 3 rookie cornerbacks that we've really profiled here for the Seahawks, the 2 draft picks being the other 2.
Yeah, and it's such a weird situation to be in if you're Seattle, where obviously you were pretty high if you're Seattle on these Auburn rookies. That's why you select them in the draft. And then you have Carlton Johnson come in and start pushing them, for their roster spots. And he's looked good. And, even on some of those reps I was talking about in joint practice, where he was getting beat, it wasn't necessarily for a lack of clearly having talent and having the fundamentals, that he needs to succeed in the NFL. It's one rep, right? Like if we just see the rep that it's a failure, we're not going to see every single rep that is good, especially when we're not there right now, right? So overall, but from what you talked about, Corbin, in the training camp practices prior to going to Tennessee last week, he has flashed and he's just dominated practices. And I think that whenever you're able to do that, and whenever you're able to put your stamp on a practice like that, that's the kind of player that Mike Macdonald is going to want. That's the kind of player that this team's going to want, just somebody who can step up. And, even if you don't know their name prior to the practice starting, you're going to know it after the practice. And I think that's important in an NFL football player, particularly from a cornerback. And that fits in with this cornerback room too, because obviously, as we know, they're all trash talkers, which is good because we like that. We like that dog in them, as you said.
And Carlton Johnson has been a bit of a trash talker on the practice field. You don't see undrafted rookies always do that, but he has been willing to dish it back out. He's been more physical than I expected, being a smaller corner under 180 pounds, but he has been willing to come up and stick his helmet into the fight, and certainly has been an intriguing player to watch from this undrafted crop. I had a chance to catch up with Carlton at the VMAC during training camp last week and see how things are going and what he's learned so far being with Devin Witherspoon, Reek Woolen, and company. Take a listen. Take me through this first training camp, what it's been like, as an undrafted player. This has been a place that undrafted players have had a ton of success, but what has it been like getting to enamor yourself in this new defense with Mike Macdonald and a very talented cornerback?
It's been really amazing. I'm actually blessed to be around so many great guys. I would call them vets at this point, whether they 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. It's been amazing just to grow with them. I've been just soaking up as much game as they could give me. Any little teaching points, little ins and outs of the game, of just in the building, how to operate. So for me, it's been really amazing to just sit back and take it all in. And when it is my time, step up.
Those veteran presences, are there any players in particular that you feel like you've been more of a sponge with? I mean, you got guys like Artie Burns, who've been in the league a long time, played outside and inside. You've got other players like Devin Witherspoon, who's only his second year, but the dude is a football wonderkin. Who are the guys that you've leaned on the most as far as making this adjustment?
I could say the whole group, honestly. It could just be simple as Artie, you come in one day, see someone that feels like you could play this a little better, and then you never know when you're gonna have one of them just step up and give you a coaching point. At the end of the day, I'm gonna take it all in. They all been here, been done it, and they having success in it. So really, the whole back end is you're like a brother, you're like a family, helping everybody out.
You're in a similar situation to George Holani. The two of you guys had top 30 visits coming out here, and then signed with the Seahawks as undrafted rookies. What was that visit like, and how much did that play into when you realized, okay, I'm not getting drafted? this is where I want to go. You're one of the first guys that's reported to sign here. How did that visit go and just the connection that you had to some of the people you met here?
Oh, the visit went really well. I was, it was a blessing. Come up here, see the facility, get to see the state, get to see the weather, what it was like for a little bit. So actually being able to sign here was truly a blessing, considering that they did bring me up. And the love and the support and then the unity that they showed here, like 12 is 1 is a real thing here, and you can feel that as soon as you walk in the building.
Were you surprised that you didn't get drafted, especially with the 40 time that you put up at Fresno State's Pro Day, the numbers that you had the last couple of years? Was that something that surprised you?
No, sir, not a surprise. I'll just say it wasn't in my plans that God had for me, and that's how I live my life. If it's going to be for me, it's for me. If it's not, it's not. But at the end of the day, we all have the same opportunity to make the team. Just got out there and play football.
I counted, maybe you could dispute this, I counted 5 pass breakups a couple days ago for you. It seemed like you were flying all over the place yesterday, had another really good day. Do you feel like your comfort level here now, in third week in your NFL training camp, first NFL training camp, do you feel like that comfort level now in McDonald's defense, do you feel like the light switch has kind of come on a little bit here the last week or so?
Yes, sir. Just from the coaching staff to the players, like I said, the vets, the way they're bringing the rookies along, the younger guys along, it's like they're not babying us, letting them step into it, putting our foot in the bucket. Yeah. And at the end of the day, we know we have their support, and we know you got your coaches and your your best player support. It goes a long ways and be able to play fast on the field.
No, he's asking for another shot in the nose, I guess.
Nah, Bobo, that's my guy.
Yeah. Getting to go against DK Metcalf, Jack Smith, and Jigba, you got a pass breakup against him the other day. And getting to go against receivers of that caliber and this offense, all the other corners I've talked to have just been talking about just how difficult that offense is making it with the things they're doing with the receivers. What's that experience been like for you as a first-year NFL quarterback? Not only that scheme, but the dudes that you are going against, that you got to play against snap after snap.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a little hectic in the beginning, getting used to the game speed. At this level, man, everybody can roll, and everybody knows how to play the game. With the simplest things, I would say that. And Coach Grubbs, man, he has a name for himself already, so of course he's gonna have that offense rolling at a high rate. And then just, like you said, the guys that we have in the receiver room is amazing, man. Talent speaks for themselves, and I'm just blessed to even be able to chance to go against them.
Have you had a chance, since you're a defensive player, I don't know if you've talked to Coach Grubb at all, but like his background, previously being an offensive coordinator for several years, I think he had 4 seasons at Fresno State. Yeah. Is that something that you've had a chance to talk to him about at all?
We had a little giggle about it here and there, but nothing too in particular. But I've already known that he was a Bulldog once before, and kind of was a good connection coming up here too, having a fellow Bulldog up here. You know, Bulldogs stick together, whether he moved on or not, but yeah.
You get to go back down to California for your NFL debut on Saturday. How are your feelings about that and the chance to play in an NFL game for the first time? And what are you hoping to go out there and accomplish here over the next couple of weeks to show this coaching staff that, hey, I belong here in this loaded quarterback?
Going back home is going to be amazing. I get to go home and play in front of my kids, which is going to be kind of a dream come true, especially for my first NFL game, to be back at home, see my family and friends. And then I would say for me to go out there this Saturday and just whatever opportunity that I get to make it the best, play fast, play physical, know my assignments. And I feel like me being me and this coaching staff and what they know, the type of players they have, it'll take care of itself.
As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Connor at CJohn Benintendi on X as well. Make sure that you subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we come back for Blue Friday, I'll be joined by Nick Lee, and the two of us will be previewing Saturday's game against the Tennessee Titans, preseason game number 2. Make sure that you're listening in. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Go Hawks.